Hello everyone, this is Good Morning Transfers. We're almost halfway through the window now and clubs' plans are starting to take shape. This is the place for your latest transfer news along with the best analysis and debate on all of the key stories, including Arsenal's need for a striker which has intensified. We'll assess potential options that they could sign this month. Can we expect a decision to be made on Marcus Rashford's future? Clubs in Italy and Spain are interested in the forward. Kyle Walker wasn't part of the Man City squad last night. We will hear from Pep Guardiola on the defender's future. Morning to all at home. What a trio we've got for you in the studio today as well. Look, the Statman's back. Statman Dave back from holiday, as you can see from his magnificent tan. Daniel Kahn and Sam Abassi here as well, bringing the good vibes. You got a bit of colour, mate, haven't you?
Cheers, Good trip skiing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting tan skiing. Right, let's get right into it. We're going to start with the big news from yesterday that broke. Arsenal are closing in on a deal to sign the Real Sociedad midfielder Martin Zubimendi in the summer. But we're hearing they're also working hard for a new striker this month. Let's start with Zubimendi, though, because there was a big saga, wasn't there, in the last transfer window with Liverpool really going after him and missing out at the last second. So how have Arsenal nipped in, and why do they want Zubimendi in the summer?
As you mentioned there, Matt, Zubimendi was one of the sagas of the summer, wasn't it? Liverpool seemed very close to signing the Spanish midfielder. We, of course, saw him play against England in the Euros final as well. He came off the bench in that game as well. And Liverpool thought they were there. They thought they'd crossed the line to get him, but he changed his mind at the final minute after activating his release clause, which is £51 million. Now, Zubimendi still has that release clause. And I think it's very interesting because Arsenal, I think you mentioned, why do they want him in the summer? I think that ideally they'd want him now, really, to reinforce that midfield. But it seems maybe they're compromising there in terms of getting forward in the line of signing him, a compromise to get him in the summer. And of course, Arsenal, they have a few midfielders who are out of contract in the summer in Thomas Partey and Jorginho, who are both over 30. Zubimendi at 25 automatically reduces that age, but also clearly a very good midfielder.
I think the interesting side of that, sorry Sam, to jump in, is kind of you look at what Real Sociedad had back in 2020, that same midfield. And when you looked at Mikel Moreno and Zubimendi, they work so well in tandem, especially in the Champions League over the last season and a half. Yeah. Brilliant together.
Yeah. Odegaard as well. Odegaard was part of that Sociedad midfield.
Yeah, I've seen a few fans saying that he's trying to recreate the Real Sociedad midfield, and I think there's been a few fans, questioning whether this makes sense because we're going to talk about a striker. But Zubimendi, like you mentioned, he's one of those midfielders that he's so sought after. Liverpool wanted him. You saw how hard they tried to get him, and if Arteta's realising that this season might be going away from them, this is the period that you can get those signings that can reinvigorate your season next season. So I think it's a good sign for them to go for him now.
I was on a few Arsenal WhatsApp groups last night, just sort of gauging the reaction to the Zubimendi news. And I think people are generally quite happy, but 9 out of 10 Arsenal fans will say to you, look, the here and now, we need a striker, or at least a forward that can maybe play through the middle. So what are the options, the realistic options for Arsenal in January?
I think it's difficult because you see all the names mentioned. I've seen hundreds of fans mention Isak. I've seen hundreds of fans mention Gyökeres, Osimhen as well. And these players are obviously of top quality, but at the same time, it's so difficult to get top strikers in January when their teams are aiming to achieve something. Isak, their teams are aiming for Champions League. Osimhen feels like he owes something to Galatasaray for giving him the opportunity to, show that he's still a top striker. And Gyökeres as well, he said that he's going to stay up until the summer. I think the most realistic option for them right now is probably Vlahovic, a player that they were linked with a few years ago in 2022. Obviously, his time at Juventus hasn't been the greatest. He's still scoring goals. He's got 12 goals, 2 assists this season. But if you speak to, or if you see any Juventus fans' frustration this season, they say he misses a lot of chances. But at the same time, I think sometimes a new environment might be good for a team. And because they want him so bad, and we've seen the Kolo Muani links to Juventus, I think it just makes sense.
It really does in that sense, and I think when you look at Vlahovic again, when he was at Fiorentina, he was a focal point of their attack. Everything went into his feet. He linked really well. What's quite strange, obviously, Thiago Motta's now a Juventus manager. He likes a forward that drops off the line. Obviously, Joshua Zirkzee at Bologna. That kind of fitted what Vlahovic was doing at Fiorentina, but maybe not now. And it's an interesting one. You mentioned all those good forwards, and Isak isn't going to leave Newcastle this January, in my opinion. 25 goals in 2024, and Shearer's managed more in a calendar year in the last 22 years. And when you look at those numbers underlying him, since the start of last season, only Haaland scored more as a striker, only Watkins has created more chances, and only Jackson has completed more dribbles. He's got that duality. He's too far away. You mentioned the likes of Osimhen as well. Could they get him from Galatasaray? He's got one of his best goal plus assists per 90 in his entire career. And then Gyökeres has basically said that he's staying at Sporting. 62 goals in 2024. Those players feel away from it. But what about someone like a Benjamin Šeško?
Yeah, who Arsenal were reportedly interested in the last window. So might they go back in for him again?
For sure, I think he's someone that has started to evolve. You look at the start of 2024, I remember watching him against Real Madrid in the Champions League knockout game. His movement was incredible. Got into so many good goal-scoring opportunities, but that day missed 3 big chances. From that point onwards, you're looking at his numbers, 18 goals in the Bundesliga. That's more than the likes of Matheus Cunha, Kai Havertz have managed in the Premier League. So he's got the quality. But also looking at his underlying numbers, he scored around 9 more goals than he should have done due to his expected goals. So big potential. And we all saw his goal against Werder Bremen this weekend. An absolute banger.
Netov. He scores some bangers, doesn't he, Šeško? So, yeah, possibly Vlahovic, possibly Šeško. These might be the more realistic options. We'll wait and see. How about outgoings? Because Arsenal might need to have some outgoings before they can think about spending big money on a striker. So who are the possible people that might leave?
Yeah, it's really interesting talking about Zubimendi and a potential striker, because a lot of these targets seem long-term thoughts, but I think when you look at outgoings, they also have a few players out of contract. I've already mentioned Jorginho and Partey. Kieran Tierney is another player who's out of contract in the summer. We've been reporting that Celtic are interested in a return for potentially him coming back to the club. And then Alexander Zinchenko is another interesting player we could see potentially leave. We understand Arsenal would be open to offers if they are to come in for him. He is in the final 18 months of his contract, and we've really seen Mikel Arteta, similar to Pep Guardiola, go away from conventional fullbacks and really play what we would perceive more as centre-backs, the likes of Calafiori, the likes of Julian Timber, playing in those fullback positions. And it's very interesting when you look at the impact Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus had when they first joined the club. It was to elevate that Arsenal squad, but it now feels like they're at a certain level and they're now looking to really elevate again to get them over the line in the title. Zubimendi, a Euros winner, if they get that big name striker who can really add that finishing touch that we've perhaps seen lacking in previous games, not to pick on Kai Havertz, but whoever's been playing in that number 9 position over the last month or two hasn't perhaps been as clinical as Arsenal would like.
OK, well, that's what the guys think. But what do you guys think at home? Let us know. Who should Arsenal sign as a striker? Give us your reasons why as well. Use the hashtag GMT when you do that on X as well. You can also use the hashtag if you're replying to any videos that we post on X, or even if you are on YouTube and you comment there. So hashtag GMT, and we'll try and find those and go through those later in the hour. As ever, you can keep across all the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. You can just scan the QR code that was on your screen right there. Let's get to our transfer to keep an eye on now, and our one to watch. The player today is Diego Carlos, Dan. Now, there were strong links, weren't there, with Carlos and Fenerbahce, but is that deal stalling?
Yes, this is a really interesting situation for Aston Villa and Carlos himself. So just update you on the deal, or potential deal with Fenerbahce. It seemed very close at one point, especially come the end of last week. Carlos signed for Aston Villa in 2022 for just over £26 million. Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce very keen on him. There seems a deal for the Brazilian has stalled. So we'll wait to see if Fenerbahce can get that deal over the line. But for Aston Villa, very interesting January, confirming Daniel Marlin yesterday. If they are to make any more movement in the transfer window, Unai Emery said yesterday, it really is one in, one out. But the interesting situation with Carlos is Pau Torres is now out for the next 6 to 8 weeks with a metatarsal injury. They only really have Tyrone Mings and Ezri Konsa as other centre-back options. So do they actually need to keep Carlos? I'm sure they would like another fullback, potentially, maybe another attacker. But they might have to keep Carlos in this window purely for cover and purely for numbers.
OK, let's move this on then to Marcus Rashford, a name we've already spoken about quite a few times. I'm sure we will for the rest of this window too. Sky Italy, though, have described today as a decisive day in Marcus Rashford's future, with AC Milan considering Barcelona as their main opponent in the race for the attacker. Some sources in Manchester believe that Barcelona is actually Rashford's favoured destination. Interesting, this, isn't it? I mean, you can see the appeal, obviously, of Barcelona. I'm sure it's most people's favourite destination. But in terms of Rashford, are Barcelona in a position to bring someone like Marcus Rashford into their side? We all know about their financial issues and their issues registering players.
Yeah, we saw that with Dani Olmo, who's been a bit of a relevation at Barcelona this season. He's been fantastic attacking midfield. And again, it's where Marcus would fit in. Obviously, players have got to go out. You're looking at maybe an Ansu Fati, a Ferran Torres. Arejo's been linked with Juventus, and that move is something that could potentially go through. But now Ingo Martinez is injured. There's question marks there at the back for Barcelona. So I think it's got to be someone on the way out. Obviously, the wages, the fee that they've got to pay to Manchester United for the loan potentially, and then in the summer, if they confirm that as a permanent transfer, there is question marks.
Just watched the Spanish Super Cup the other day when they absolutely tore Real Madrid to shreds, 5-2. Didn't seem to have too many problems going forward either. You've got Yamal, you've got Rafinha on the flanks. Where would Rashford fit in to that side?
I'm not sure. I think out of all the options, it's probably the most difficult to see where he would play. Maybe Rafinha, he's played in attacking midfield this season around 6 times, but he is incredible off the left, and he's been a revelation.
A renovation.
Nailed it.
Great work.
He's been a revelation to them this season. He's captained them a few times. He had such an outstanding performance against Real Madrid, and he seems to be the heart of that attack. Obviously, Lamine Yamal is the youngster and everyone's praising him. But when you see Barcelona attack, he's the main player. So maybe they're seeing Lewandowski might get injured or want to give him a few minutes on the substitute bench, or maybe Rafinha coming into attacking midfield. But I think that place would be harder for him to get in than anywhere else.
I think the interesting thing from Marcus Rashford's point of view is, let's not forget, I know I mentioned this last week, he has not played for Manchester United since the beginning of December. He is out of the England picture as we speak right now because he's not playing. So for Marcus Rashford, he needs to play. That is the first priority, you would think. I do agree with what you're saying about Barcelona. How much will he play? But let's not forget, they are in the middle of a title race, just a few points behind Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. And they are also doing very well in the Champions League table as well. And because he's played in the Europa League, he wouldn't be cup-tied if he was to go to Barcelona. Let's not forget, Barcelona will want to rotate your Yamals, your Rafinhas, so he should get game time if he is to go there. I just think as well, in terms of the football...
It's so settled. Their front line is so... They're so used to each other, and I feel like they're the best attacking team in the world right now, or one of.
In a way, you have to praise Marcus Rashford if it is his preferred choice, if he does want to go. Because as you said, the players he would be competing against are world-class, and perhaps Marcus Rashford hasn't shown that consistency in his career so far that he is at that level, but it's a challenge for him nevertheless.
For sure, but I think that, like you mentioned, the position as well. Balde on the overlap, Rashford inside from the left wing, that is the perfect position for him. The movement of Lewandowski off the line, the runs from deep, we saw that against Real Madrid, how potent that is. That's basically Rashford's game. I think it would be exciting. I think Hansi Flick wants depth in attack. But you think about Hansi Flick and the great players he's worked with. He's turned some wingers into some absolute monsters. Kingsley Coman, the likes of Gnabry at Bayern Munich. It would be super exciting for Rashford to move to Barcelona.
OK, it would, wouldn't it? It'd be exciting for us too to keep tabs on that. We will hopefully have some news on that. We're hearing that it could be a decisive day today in terms of the future of Marcus Rashford. Stay tuned, plenty to come on Good Morning Transfers. Chelsea want to sign a centre-back, and West Ham, well, they need a forward. We'll discuss that and a lot more in a couple of minutes. We'll see you then. you a transfer update, shall we? Now, Man City target Omar Marmoush started and scored for Eintracht Frankfurt in their game against Freiburg as talks between the clubs continue. In terms of outgoings, potential, Kyle Walker will only leave Manchester City this month if he can secure a deal with an elite club that will further his England prospects. Manchester United do not want to sell Alejandro Garnacho amid interest from Napoli, and it's understood it would take a huge offer for them to even consider sanctioning his exit. Randall Kolo Muani, he's going to have a medical this afternoon ahead of his loan move to Juventus from PSG. Chelsea have contacted Bayern Munich to ask about the availability of Matisse Tell. Chelsea also made a firm inquiry about him in the summer. And finally, in Saudi Arabia, Al Nassr are in talks about extending Cristiano Ronaldo's contract.
Now let's reflect a little bit on some of the games last night in the Premier League. Some surprise inclusions as well as exclusions to match day squads. Let's start with Andreas Pereira, though. He started for Fulham at West Ham, despite being linked with a few bids from Palmeiras, the Brazilian side. Now, he was at fault for one of the goals. Sam, let me start with you. You speak to so many Premier League players on a weekly basis. Do you think some of the noise that might be around a few of them in January can be a bit of a distraction?
I don't know if distraction is the right word. Obviously, it's something that will play on their mind, but they're professionals. You know, mistakes can happen at any point. And I think for him especially, he's been at the club. He's got over 100 appearances for them. He's obviously wanted to play the game, and he's been such a crucial cog to, you know, them being where they are under Marco Silva. So I feel like people shouldn't look into that too much, but at the same time, they're human, and if they are going to make moves, it's obviously going to be something that's going to be playing on their mind. That's why sometimes we do see players not playing in teams or managers deciding to take them out of the limelight because of knowing that it could affect them.
Yeah, it is very unique with them having to play matches during a transfer window, of course. Dave, let's talk about West Ham. First win for Graham Potter. Very interesting, of course, with their injuries up front. He played Lucas Paqueta as a bit of a false nine in that role. Does that show they have a potential solution in that position, or do you think they need to dip into the window and sign another striker?
I think they probably do need another striker. You think of Danny Ings is only recognised forward that's fit. At the same time, Souček, Paquetá really work well up front. You know, we look at Pereira, and yes, it was a bit of a mistake, but the pressure West Ham put on that Fulham team was fantastic. And if you look at the challenge intensity, that takes into consideration defensive actions versus the opposition's possession. West Ham were like bottom of the Premier League. Potter already is jumping up. That's a different approach for them. So that could work together in terms of Paquetá completed 100% of his dribbles, won 9 of his 13 ground duels, won 3 of his 7 aerial duels, which was a big surprise for me. Also scored a great goal. That's something that I think they can build on. It's a good platform, I think, and playing as sort of 2 false nines in Souček and Paquetá works well.
Very, very interesting. We'll see if Graham Potter continues with that. But Axel Disasi was also absent from Chelsea's squad for their game against Bournemouth amid reports he could leave in this transfer window. Christopher Nkunku and Renato Vega were also absent. Oh, they were both on the bench, I should say. Now, Sam, it's the first sign, really, with Axel Disasi not being in the matchday squad that potentially he could leave in this window. Do you think that would be good business by Chelsea?
I think at this point you can see that he's fallen out of favour with Enzo Maresca, especially playing in the position that he favours as centre-back. You know, he's played 16 times this season, 11 times has been at right-back, not his favoured position. He's played there a few times for Chelsea, played there for Monaco as well. But when you look at the centre-backs that Chelsea have, you've got Fofana, you've got obviously out injured, you've got Tosin, you've got Josh Achampong, who started yesterday, 18 years old, and that's a lot of, you know, trust to have for an 18-year-old. But I think Enzo Maresca has a particular style that he wants for his centre-backs, and I think Disasi, even though he has been trusted in a few games, is probably one of those players that, you know, Enzo doesn't mind losing at this point to get other centre-backs in.
I mean, Enzo Maresca's made it very clear since the summer he wants to trim that squad down. Now, Ben Chilwell and Carney Chukwuemeka, 2 other players that clearly haven't been part of his Premier League plans. Dave, I just wonder, would either of those players be good signings for other Premier League clubs in this window?
I think Carney's got to go out of the Premier League to Borussia Dortmund. That makes a lot of sense. We've seen the English players thrive in that league at that club. In terms of Ben Chilwell, that's an interesting one. Graham Potter's been using his left-back in a very attacking position. First, we saw Paquetá tucking inside, allowing the left-back push forward. And yesterday we saw Carlos Soler going inside with, of course, Emerson bombing on. Chilwell is a very, very good wing-back. We all saw what he could do for Chelsea, especially in that Champions League run, a goal against Porto, but, of course, lifting the trophy at the end of it. I think he's a player that would really suit Graham Potter, suit the system, and a player that has worked under Graham Potter previously. So that makes a lot of sense. Chilwell to West Ham United.
So clearly a bit of a busy window perhaps for Chelsea. Still a lot of business to do.
Yeah, it could be quite a lot of business at Chelsea, but how about at Liverpool? Is it all about keeping hold of the big three? Jurgen Klopp hopes that Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mo Salah will sign new contracts at Liverpool. However, he's been given no indication if they intend to stay at Anfield or not.
From my point of view, I would love all three of them to extend their contracts, but I don't know. They didn't tell me.
One of the three, all three for Red Bull?
Oh, yeah. Virgil, I'm pretty sure he would love to have now 5 more years at Liverpool and then between 41 and 44 for New York Red Bull, because he probably underestimates US football, but open arms, no problem. Mo, yes, would love to. I don't think we have a chance to pay him, to be honest. And then Trent, yeah. And he could finally learn defending. I can't believe that you all discuss this still. It's so poor. It's so poor, really. I mean, I'm really happy that I'm not part of that. Unfortunately, I watched a few of the press conference when he had to talk about it. You think, oh my God, they still don't understand it. And yes, he didn't play well against Manchester United. But if you would make such a fuss of him when he plays well, like we make a fuss of it when he doesn't play well, that would be really a cool planet. Yeah.
Fascinating interview that, wasn't it, with Jurgen Klopp? He answered absolutely everything. How about his old rivals, Manchester City, then? Because they let a 2-goal lead slip last night at Brentford. Defensive reinforcements, they can't come soon enough, can they? We'll update you on the progress of their potential signings. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. We asked you earlier to give your thoughts on which striker Arsenal should sign this month. Thank you very much for getting involved, whether that be on YouTube or on X. We've had a few of you say Dusan Vlahovic. Darren says Šeško. Shocked no one has made a move for him so far. And also Chris Moy. Vlahovic didn't play last night. Vlahovic was always Arsenal's #1 target. I've always said Juve's style shouldn't be right for him. And this is a bit of an interesting one. I'm not sure I totally agree with this. John Paul Holden, 20 million plus Ødegaard to go all out for John Duran. I'm not too sure about that. Are you an Aston Villa fan or are you an Arsenal fan? I think I'd want to keep Ødegaard. If I was an Arsenal fan, I certainly wouldn't want to give him away plus 20 million.
Well, the second best minutes-to-goal ratio in Premier League history behind Erling Haaland. John Duran would score goals for Arsenal.
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying he's not a best striker. I just wouldn't want to lose Ødegaard. Dan, you've got some breaking news or some news for us concerning Leicester?
Yeah, very, very interesting. So their forward, Tom Cannon, who's been on loan at Stoke City this season, news has just broken that they've recalled him from that loan at Stoke. Now, Cannon has 9 goals in 22 appearances in the Championship this season. Now, the question will be, well, are Leicester recalling him to play this season because they don't have a lot of forward options? But my instincts would be actually that Cannon is attracting a lot of interest across the Championship. So perhaps Leicester have a club or have some interest in mind that they'll look to recoup some money in this window to look to spend elsewhere, because I think Leicester very keen on making sales where they can to reinforce Ruud van Nistelrooy's squad in this window.
OK, interesting. Right, let's move this on to Manchester City then, because Kyle Walker was left out of the Man City squad to play Brentford after asking to leave. The England defender will only leave City, though, if he can secure a move to an elite club that will further his England prospects. This is what Pep said last night on Walker.
Pep, obviously that's 2 games in a row now where Kyle Walker hasn't been involved. Do you think it's likely he's played his last game for the club?
I said what I said. I don't have anything more to say.
And in terms of the 3 potential incomings, Kusanov?
Nothing to say.
OK, so it appears, though, Kyle Walker might be on his way out. But where will he go? We're hearing he's had approaches from the Saudi Pro League, but he's not interested at the moment. He wants to carry on at the toppest level. Sorry, toppest? The top level. Toppest, an incredible word there.
We're making lots of new words in this show.
The toppest level, the best of the best. But he turns 35 in May. How much interest are we expecting in him from top European clubs? Because that's clearly where he wants to go.
Well, let's look at his CV. I mean, England right back who's won 6 Premier League titles, Premier League title, Champions League title. He started 2 international tournament finals for England, let's not forget that. But as you mentioned, he is 35 years old now. AC Milan are a club who I think would be interested in someone like Kyle Walker, but Serie A clubs also have a rule around the amount of non-EU players they can sign. So we're talking about their potential interest in Marcus Rashford, so they might have a decision to make on them. But I think from Kyle Walker's point of view, he still, of course, believes he can play at the top level for a number of years. But I also think it's quite interesting because Kyle Walker has been part of such an important period of success for Manchester City. But also, he's not going to be kind of living in a different world when he looks at potential signings of Kusanov, Vitor, Reis as well. He'll know that Manchester City will be looking to rebuild that back four, part of their team. And so I think he's probably thinking, how much longer do I have in the starting lineup? I don't think Manchester City, whether they look to negotiate new contracts, etc., will be able to give Kyle Walker the guarantees of starting every single week. So I think for Kyle Walker, he's probably at a crossroads in his career, and he's now weighing up those options, and I think he's fair enough to do so.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at Manchester City and where they are right now, they're so exposed on the counter-attack. And maybe that's not where Kyle Walker is at his best right now, in terms of the pace that he's always had. Has that been limited this season? Thinking Serie A, the pace of the football there would be fantastic. Inter Milan would be another interesting club. Maybe Bayern Munich, who he spoke to in the summer. He's definitely got a place in these types of sides, top level player.
Yeah, there was a bit of interest from Inter Milan, wasn't there, that we've seen reported in the papers. See if that is followed up. In terms of incomings for Manchester City, well, their target, Omar Marmoush, actually started for Eintracht Frankfurt last night. He scored a goal and assisted 2 as talks between the clubs continue. City have reached an agreement in principle with Palmeiras for the young defender, young centre-back, Vitor Reis. Let's start with Marmoush, though, Sam. Interesting that he played last night. Often in this kind of a situation, with such a big money deal on the line, a player would be left out of the squad. I mean, Kyle Walker was left out of the Man City squad last night. Can we take anything from that?
I think it's just Omar Marmoush being a professional and understanding what Frankfurt has done for him. He's had an incredible start to this season. He's got 15 goals, 10 assists in the league. And I think they're also in a position where if Manchester City don't reach the mark that they want, then he's going to continue playing. And we've seen, we spoke about Andreas Pereira earlier about, the mistake that he made. But at the same time, like we said, these lot are the best players in the world. They're professionals, they want to perform week in, week out. They owe their teammates as well, they want to still perform at that top level. And I think that's just what he's doing. And he's still proving that, if he does when that move eventually does happen, he will want to perform to that level.
Pep's comments were interesting after the game, because he sort of highlighted the defensive midfield position, said we're still struggling a bit there. They've let another 2-goal lead slip. 3 big names, well, three expensive names they've been associated with, 2 centre-backs and 1 forward. But even with those players, without someone who can play defensive midfield, are their problems not going to be sorted?
I mean, it was very interesting watching the game against Brentford last night because clearly that is, as you mentioned, an issue. I mean, they were caught on the counter multiple times yesterday. And then you looked at the midfield with Kovacic, Bernardo Silva. I mean, they were nowhere near the defence for the goal. We were watching it earlier. And there is a massive gap between the back four and the midfield. Now, who did they have off the bench? They didn't want to bring on Nico O'Reilly. They brought on Ilkay Gundogan, who clearly doesn't necessarily have the legs in that midfield anymore as well. I do think the interesting thing is, and maybe what we're losing sight of a little bit, because Pep Guardiola is so astute in his press conferences, really talking about he's proud of how his team's playing, he's backing all the players he has, is this is not normal for Manchester City to do in January. If these signings cross the line, Marmoush, Reis, Kusamov, Manchester City are spending over £120 million this window. They haven't spent that in the last decade in January. They've signed the likes of, we were looking earlier, Wilfried Bony, Aymeric Laporte, Julian Alvarez a few years ago. That was just under £100 million. So clearly Manchester City, no matter what Pep Guardiola is telling us in the media, they have identified they need a rebuild. What I would say is they're perhaps not going to be able to address every issue in this window. They probably are going to address what they can, let some of these younger players grow, because as you mentioned, Reish, Kusimov, they're still very young. They're going to need time to settle in England, and maybe perhaps the midfield is just something they delay a few months till the summer.
I think that position is probably the most difficult to replace in general. We've seen them try to do it when they've looked for, options for Rodri. They've tried with Calvin Phillips, Nunes as well. He's playing on the wing now. It's such a difficult position and such a crucial position for Pep. But he said multiple times about how often they have competed at this level in the last few years. It's not going to be easy. Like, I feel like maybe they're using this season and this window to just reset and try to, maintain, the distance between the top four and get into that top four, hopefully. But, they've been performing at the top level for so long. It's definitely going to have an impact. And we're seeing it that, the players are tired. They need to refresh. So I'm not surprised that they're making so many movements in this window.
You're right. That position is very hard, isn't it, at the top level to replace. And it does seem, with 2 out of these 3 potential new signings being centre-backs, that Man City are targeting the area. Can you see why that is the area that they're really looking at first?
Yeah, 100%. I think defensive midfield is a massive hole, but also at the back. When you look at the goals conceded this season, 29 already in the Premier League. In the entirety of last campaign, 34. But then you look a little bit further than that. One of the big problems with Manchester United last season was the expected goals they were conceded was massive. We're seeing a similar trend with Manchester City. They're ranked 15th in the Premier League this season. Usually, they're top of that statistic. Yeah. When you consider the likes of Brentford, Leicester City, West Ham, Southampton and Ipswich are their peers in terms of expected goals conceded, there's a real problem. They've gone from last season at 1.01 to this season at 1.66. That is a massive drop-off. And yes, it comes from the midfield. We see that. And Rodri is so good in possession, counter-pressing, winning the ball back. He's elite level. It's difficult to replace that. But at the same time, the defenders, the goalkeeper, they're also slightly less than what they were doing last season. Nathan Ake, though, I thought was fantastic last night, and he's going to be a big impact in the second half of the season.
Yeah. OK, right, let's go from blue to red then, because Manchester United have not received any formal approaches for the winger Alejandro Garnacho yet. Sky in Italy are reporting that Napoli are interested in signing the forward as they look to replace Kavica Kvaratskhelia, who is expected to leave in this window. Sam, I'm going to get onto Garnacho in a second, but just want to reflect on Kvaratskhelia, really, because it's expected he's going to go to Paris Saint-Germain, maybe a slight departure from their recent transfer policy as well. Are you surprised that no Premier League clubs have been heavily linked with him up until now?
Yeah, but also I feel like he's just hell-bent on going to PSG. Like, so from when the link came up, it was just like that was the only club that seemed to be making the progress. I know Liverpool were interested. I know Chelsea. I've seen rumours of Chelsea as well. But maybe, those type of wingers suit, European football. Maybe he's still very young. He can go. He's had a great career at Napoli. He can go to PSG and he can still have an impact in the Premier League if he chooses to come here. But I think the way PSG is set up, they want superstars. Barcola's had a great season, and it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts his minutes. But I think it's a great move for him.
What's quite interesting is almost like maybe the Barcelona team under Enrique, where Messi was that playmaker from a wide area, then you'd like Suarez and Neymar. PSG could build something similar, where instead of Kvaratskhelia or the left winger being the goal scorer, as we've seen with Barco this season, they're actually changing that point of attack, which again is going to be super interesting in the back end of the Champions League and in Liga.
Garnacho, though, Dan, we're hearing it would only take a huge offer. If that offer came in and Manchester United did decide to sell, how do you think that would go down with the United fans?
I think they would be disappointed, to be honest. And I think it's because Alejandro Garnacho, he showed against Arsenal, in that FA Cup game on the weekend, just his potential when he sat Bruno Fernandes for that goal. And he is such an exciting prospect. I mean, I think when you watch what he can do, let's not forget his overhead kick last season.
Yeah, well.
His potential is superstar potential. But he needs consistency, and I think that's what also Manchester United fans want to see from him, as well as Ruben Amorim. So, again, he has a long contract at Manchester United. They're not under any pressure to sell, But I think as this rebuild continues under Ruben Amorim, they are going to have to generate sales. And I do think perhaps it might not be Garnacho, perhaps it might not be Kobe Mainoo, but I think there will be some big decisions in this Manchester United squad in the next 12 months, and there might be some sales we're very surprised about because we know they need to sell to really bring in the amount of numbers perhaps Ruben Amorim wants.
If he does get sold, it's going to have to be a lot of money, because if he was a player that was playing in Europe in the Bundesliga or La Liga, 20 years old, 8 goals, 5 assists, we would be here in Premier League clubs 70 million upwards because of a player like that. He's been consistent over the last few years. You can really see him coming into his own. So it's going to have to be a lot of money if Manchester United, if I was Manchester United, you have to put the price at this high, because we're seeing the price Kvaratskhelia is going for, other wingers in the world, what they're linked with, and I think Garnacho is on that level.
Yeah. Yes, that's why I'm not a big fan of PSR, really, because clubs look into selling their prize assets, which I personally do not think is a good thing, really. But a lot of clubs do now think, right, this is our way to cash in, and this is our way to buy someone of high value, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, that's another story. It's another show. Coming up, we're going to look ahead to tonight's North London derby. We've already been talking about Arsenal and what they need in terms of an attacking player. But you know what? Spurs, they're also looking to sign a forward. We'll talk about that next. Right, we are taking you back to 2014. We were going to. Anyway, we're going to tell you about the time Chelsea re-signed Nemanja Matic from Benfica in a deal worth £21 million. But you know what? We will do that now. Here we go. We finally got it back. Here we go. Let's get into this. He previously played for the club in 2011, but he left for the Portuguese league. He made a further 121 appearances at Stamford Bridge before moving to Manchester United in 2017. And Sam, you're shaking your head, mate. Is that because you want him back at the club at peak Matic?
He was just so good. And I remember when that signing was made, I think the first game that he had was against a prime Yaya Toure, and he just locked him up. And that doesn't happen to Yaya Toure a lot. And he was so crucial to, Chelsea winning the Premier League title. And since then, obviously now you can see Caicedo and Enzo and Lavia have come in to, fill those gaps. But that gap in between, there wasn't a CDM that was as dominant at Chelsea. So yeah, what a player, what a player.
I love it when people just get misty-eyed about the past.
And he had a scream in him as well.
He was so upset. He was just,
great player.
That was a great time. OK, let's move on to a massive game in the Premier League tonight as Arsenal take on Tottenham in the small matter of the North London derby. Both sides are in need of a forward, Dan. We've spoken about Arsenal already and the fact that they probably need a hitman, a striker who can play through the middle. With Spurs, are they more in need of a versatile attacker who maybe could play through the middle but also on the flanks because they've already got Solanke there?
I think so, and also I think there's a few other things to think about in terms of what Ange Postecoglou has done this season. He's moved Dejan Kulusevski to a more number 10 role, so he's already down a winger in that sense. And also a few other players like Timo Werner perhaps haven't hit the heights or grown as much as maybe Postecoglou has wanted this season. Now, who is out there? I mean, someone I've been talking to you all about all morning is Jonathan David, I think, the Canadian international, 17 goals for Lille this season in all competitions. He's also out of contract in the summer, and he predominantly plays through the middle, but he can play on the right as well. And I do think, I was at the Tamworth game on Sunday, and I know it was Tamworth, an FA Cup game, but I do think you look at Spurs' bench, yes, they have Mickey Moore, a few other players as well who can, be attacking options, but I do think they need more players and options to give Solanke a break, first of all, because I think they are very dependent on him, but also a few other versatile forwards, as you mentioned, just to give him more flexibility.
I was going to say, Jonathan Davies been linked with a move for I feel like every show that I've done. Why has he not made the move yet? Do you think it's down to him potentially just being in his comfort zone, or a team not really wanting to chance or not needing the type of forward he is?
I wonder if it's a bit of both. Is it perhaps actually he decided a while ago he'd prefer to run down his contract, and so he has the choice of clubs he wants to join, rather than Lille perhaps dictating whoever brings in the biggest fee will just take whatever we want to in that sense, because he still is relatively young. I think also a bit more time in Ligue 1. You'll know better than me, Dave, but I think a bit more time in Ligue 1 to really harness his craft wouldn't do him any harm to really adapt to a league like the Premier League. So for me, I'm very excited about him. I've watched him play international football as well. I think he's an excellent talent, and it'd be very interesting to see if he could make that step up in the Premier League. I think Ange Postecoglou would be a great manager for him.
No, for sure. Again, you know, the development of Jonathan David, being a second striker behind Yildiz, and then now he's the centre forward. He's the guy. And I think that development is really important for players. And some players rush it, and it is. I feel like it's going to be one of those things. Like, you look at a player that's moved to the Premier League, everyone's going, where's this guy come from? Jonathan David is in front of us all, and I think he'll be another one of those players.
But we have said it before. I've said it before already in this transfer window. But if you look at Spurs' back line tonight, you know, it's down to the bare bones, isn't it? Archie Gray has had to play centre-back quite a bit. Dragoshin has had to play a lot. Do they not need a bit more beefing up in terms of the back four as well?
I think they really do. I think that's the area where I'd be targeting, centre-back, especially on that right-hand side. Alexandre Ribeiro, who plays for Lille, reminds me a little bit of Gabriel, but on the right side of the defence versus the left side of the defence. Very, very dominant both on the floor, aerially very dominant, good on the ball as well. In terms of the statistics, has won 79% of his aerial duels in Liga this season. That would rank him really high in terms of centre-backs in Europe. Completed 91% of his passes. But more importantly, Lille really press. And the big thing when you're looking at Spurs defenders, can they defend 1v1? He's someone that I believe could do that, but would he play second fiddle to a Romero, to a Van der Ven, would be the question, because he's probably too good to do that.
Yeah. OK, Dan, just got a newsline coming out of Sky Germany, actually, because Florian Plettenberg, our colleague out there, is reporting that West Ham are now making a serious attempt to sign Tayo Awoniyi with immediate effect, and that talks have started. We told you yesterday that Nottingham Forest will not allow Awoniyi to leave this month unless they have a new striker to replace him. So that is very interesting, isn't it? That talks have started, although we're not hearing that Forest have got a replacement in yet.
To be honest, it would make a lot of sense to me. We were talking about West Ham earlier, desperately need a striker because of Fulkrug, because of Mikel Antonio. I also think for Tayo Awoniyi, again, I saw them on Saturday against Luton. He started that game, but because purely for the form of Chris Wood and what he's done over the last 12 months, Awoniyi, who was such an important part of this Nottingham Forest side, the first 2 seasons they were promoted from the Championship, essentially really helped keep them up in that first year. He scored some very important goals for them. But over the last 12 months, he had a really serious injury last season, hasn't been quite able to play consistently since then and really get up to match sharpness. And I think we've seen that even on Saturday against Luton, where he really looked a bit less match sharp, his touch was a bit off, just needs some consistency. And I think somewhere like West Ham, he'll be able to play, of course, because there's a gap in that position. But he is a fantastic striker when he is on it, and he just needs some game time, really.
I think when you look at a profile of Graham Potter's striker, it's a striker they can play into and they can play off, and that's exactly what he has done at Forest and what he could do for West Ham United.
Yeah. Sam, what do you reckon? Do you think he could be a good fit? I mean, West Ham looked pretty good going forward last night, didn't they? Scored 3 goals against Fulham with Paquetá playing in the middle.
Yeah, I think he just needs to play week in, week out. And you saw how much the goal meant to him when he scored recently. And I think he's the type of player that, obviously, Chris Wood he's having an amazing season. We're probably one of the best strikers in the league right now. And it's going to be difficult to, take that position from him. So a team like West Ham would be great for him. But at the same time, Nottingham Forest might be thinking, do we want to upset the team, the chemistry? We've got a good striker that can come off the bench. I know they're going to be conscious of that.
One thing I would just say very quickly is Nottingham Forest were interested in Santiago Jimenez. We spoke about him a bit earlier in the summer, talking about potential replacements. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at him once again this window.
Guys, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Great to have you back, Stan. All right, all the guys will be back, though, of course, a bit later, because we've got transfer talk coming up. Tomorrow, Good Morning Transfers is back at the same time, 9 a.m. Statman will be here, we won't. As I said, we'll be back at 12. Tim Vickery, South American football expert, joins us from Brazil. We'll also be live to Ipswich and Manchester United, 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. for your transfer show, Dharmesh Sheth and Tim Thornton tonight. But stay with us, because coming up next, it is the football show with Rob Wootton. He'll be speaking to Chris Boyd.